I questioned whether I wanted to do a video on this or not, but I've decided it's necessary because there's actually a surprising amount of interesting things that have come from this. So for those who don't know, DC FanDome just released their official schedule. I say just, it's been a few hours now, but I was asleep for the first 2 hours, and then on top of that, I spent 4 hours, believe it or not, compiling all the information from the DC FanDome lineup and then trying to figure out as much as I could about the event. And I think I have a pretty good grasp on what's happening here. So if you don't know who I am and you've just managed to stumble across this video by mistake, what I do on this channel is very video game oriented, so I won't be talking about the TV stuff that's here, although I'm incredibly excited about it. That is why I intend to stay up for the entire 24-hour event. I want to watch as much of this stuff as possible. I'm sure I'm going to miss something, but I'm going to try to watch everything from this event. So for people who don't know how this all works, this is very much going to be like a traditional convention, but done in kind of a video format. You're going to have like a little avatar. You can walk around the world of DC FanDome and then go to specific events, choose where you want to be, though they are doing repeats of certain events just in case you missed one, because obviously you can't be everywhere at once. Now, this is split up into 6 different areas. There's the Hall of Heroes, the Watchverse, the Kidsverse, the Uverse, the Funverse, and the Insiderverse. Now, for what we do on this channel, again, very video game oriented, there's 2 things that we need to worry about: the Hall of Heroes and Watchverse. So Hall of Heroes is exciting because this is where all of their big reveals are happening. We're going to focus on Hall of Heroes for the first half of this video. Just scrolling through some of these events, you can see things like the Wonder Woman 1984 panel. I'm sure they're going to reveal some footage from the movie there, and then also talk to some of the cast. And in fact, if you click on these events, you can get additional information. So using the Wonder Woman example, we can see that Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, and Kristen Wiig will all be there. Oh, on top of that, they do actually specifically mention that they'll be revealing a new sneak peek at the upcoming film. So surprisingly, the additional details about each of these panels do actually provide quite a bit of insight on what's going to be there. If we go to the WB Games Montreal thing, which we'll talk about in just a moment, we don't get a lot of information because it is yet to be announced. Now, you're going to see timestamps as I go through this stuff. Just ignore all the times that you see on your screen because that's local for me. With that in mind, let's go over some of this information. So again, the day starts off with Wonder Woman 1984, and then 30 minutes after that, we're going to get the WB Games Montreal announcement. Of course, this is probably going to be the big Batman game that they've been teasing for a while. The rumored title is Arkham Knights, so I'm guessing it's going to be Arkham Knights. And then after that, we get a bunch of different stuff from all over the place. If you're interested in DC, I'd recommend checking out the vast majority of these panels, but if you're just here for video game stuff, you're not going to get anything interesting for quite a while. That's not to say that there's nothing interesting happening here. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening here. The introducing Flash panel looks exciting. Ezra Miller's going to be there. Literally everything here looks pretty exciting to me. There's a live acoustic performance. There's art stuff with Jim Lee. But for video game stuff and potential video game stuff, as far as specific announcements go, you'll have to wait almost 7 hours for the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League announcement. I'm really excited to see what we get from Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. Just that title alone, or Kill the Justice League, not Kills the Justice League. That title alone is incredibly intriguing, and I'm very curious to see what they're doing with that game. That's not the meat and potatoes. The meat and potatoes is the to be announced stuff. This is the entire reason I've decided to make this video, because it's pretty exciting. So of all of these events that are listed on any single one of these pages, again, I've gone through all of it, there are 4 unannounced things. Now, a lot of stuff at DC FanDome is replayed, or they use the terminology encore, because it is a 24-hour event and they want to make sure that everyone doesn't miss anything. Now, for the 4 events that I was talking about, there is the surprise DC comic panel, which has an encore listing. Ignore the DC comic panel though, because I'm pretty sure that's just specifically about comic books. Now, what I want you to focus on is the to be announced thing that actually is specifically listed as to be announced. That does not have an encore listing, but there is 3 different listings for to be announced. Now, that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean 3 different announcements, or it could mean 1 different announcement and 2 different encores of that same announcement. For context, pretty much everything has multiple encores here. There's a couple exceptions to that rule. The CNN Heroes, Real Life Heroes in the Age of the Pandemic, that has 2 different listings, but I don't believe it's an encore. I think it's just going to be 2 separate segments, at least from what I understand, because it doesn't have the encore terminology in it. Now, for the to be announced stuff, if it was going to be an encore, I don't know why they wouldn't just say encore next to it, because everything that is a replay does have the encore terminology. So it seems kind of strange to not have that listed on the to be announced thing, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe it is 3 different announcements, maybe it's not. If I had to guess, it is just one announcement because pretty much everything after the first wave of news is an encore. So honestly, I would be a bit surprised if this was multiple announcements. I'm pretty sure it's just the one announcement. But I think both interpretations is reasonable just because I don't know why they wouldn't use the encore terminology at the end of the to be announced. This could very well be 3 or 1 announcements. It's not particularly important for our speculation. Now, I'm going to choose to focus on Injustice for a moment. The reason I want to focus on Injustice is because we've spent a lot of time talking about Injustice leading up to this event. Not just me, although I have talked about it a lot in various videos. Ed Boon's been talking about Injustice going into the event. Boss Logic, various people who work at DC, DC Comics Twitter account has talked about Injustice. There's been a lot of Injustice talk leading up to the event. Now, before we start actually talking about the specifics of this, I want to say that wherever your speculation was at a couple days ago, I think it should still be there. I don't think this schedule actually impacts any level of speculation at all. I don't think it tells us any new information. I don't think it deconfirms anything. I don't think it confirms anything. I really think that this schedule told us nothing, at least in the way of video game speculation. We already knew that WB Montreal was there to reveal their new game. We already knew that Suicide Squad was happening, and we already knew that Ed Boon was going to be there, and we knew that there was a good chance he would be there just to talk about Injustice and maybe a possibility of Injustice 3. And I think that is exactly still where we should be. So let's talk about why that is. So what is Ed Boon doing at the event? We know that Ed Boon's going to be there. What is he actually doing? Well, there's theoretically 2 different events, or actually there's 3 different events he could be at. For the sake of the rest of this video, I'm going to refer to all of these as panels, even if they're not specifically panels. It's just easier terminology to follow. So there's 3 different panels that Ed Boon could be at. Now I'm going to start referring to a couple different time slots. Keep in mind that these will be different for you depending on what time zone you live in. Now, I live in the most strange time zone. I live in Australia, so everything is kind of like backwards. So my apologies for that. If you want to know the exact times, I'll leave the DC FanDome schedule in the description so you can go check what time it is for you. It should display as your local time. All right, with that in mind, let's talk about these panels. Now, obviously, ideally, we would like to see Ed Boon in the surprise reveal slot, whatever that is, the to be announced thing. And he very well could be. But what are the other Injustice related things at the event that Ed Boon could be involved in? Well, first of all, there's the Injustice 2 Latin America / Brazil show match, though I don't think Ed Boon will be specifically involved in this. That's not to say that he couldn't be involved with this, I'm just not necessarily expecting it. The panel is going to be in Portuguese and Spanish with English subtitles with various pro players from that region. It's not something that I would expect Ed Boon to be involved in, but it wouldn't shock me either. The thing I'm assuming that he will almost certainly be in is the Injustice Inside, or Inside Injustice. The idea behind this panel, they don't provide a lot of details, but the gist that I get is that it's an inside look at the creation process for the video games and the comic books. It's an entire 30 minutes long, so I'm guessing there's a lot of detail in that one. To be clear, Ed Boon is like definitely at the Inside Injustice thing. The question is just whether he is at that plus another thing. In fact, I can tell you exactly who's going to be on that Inside Injustice panel. It's going to be Jim Lee, Ed Boon, Ben Abernathy, Dominic, and Jess Chan. At least that's what I would assume based on Tom Taylor's tweet earlier from the month. But here's the thing, let's assume for just one moment that the to be announced thing is Injustice 3. Doesn't it all kind of line up perfectly, the time zones? Let me show you what I mean. The Injustice 2 show match happens at 4:45 a.m. for me, so that might be 4:45 p.m. wherever you are. And then just 2 hours later is the to be announced thing that's going to be on the main stage. So the show match happens, then the to be announced thing, and then 3 hours and 20 minutes later is the Inside Injustice, making the hit games and comic books. Wouldn't it just make a whole lot of sense if they did the show match for Injustice, the Injustice 3 reveal, and then they talk about the making of Injustice 3 and the comic books? Doesn't it just kind of all line up? Now, that's not to say that Injustice 3 is happening. Of course, we're never gonna know until we get to the event, or unless somebody like leaks it. But that scheduling is kind of nice. The order that all of this stuff happens to be in is kind of perfect, is it not? You show Injustice 2 to the world, you remind everybody what Injustice is. The people who forgot about Injustice think to themselves, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if we had a new Injustice game? I would play that. And then they announce Injustice 3 a couple hours later, and then a few hours after that, they talk about the creation process for that game, especially right now with the way that the world works. It all just kind of works, right? You give the news outlets some time to talk about the Injustice 3 announcement. Also, if you look at it relative to the other video game announcements, it's kind of spaced out perfectly. Warner Brothers Games Montreal happens at 1:30 for me, and then the to be announced happens 5 hours later at 6:45 p.m. And then an hour and 20 minutes later is the Suicide Squad game announcement. Like, you give ample time to all the news outlets to go run and talk about the various games. It's worth noting that there's no time slot given for the to be announced thing, so it's impossible to say whether this is a half an hour thing, a 20-minute thing, a 10-minute thing. But what we do know is that the other video game announcements are relatively long. WB Montreal has been given 20 minutes for their reveal, and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League has also been given 20 minutes. So it wouldn't surprise me if we end up with a 20-minute time slot for the to be announced thing. And just looking at the other events surrounding it, it kind of has that exact time slot. 2:45 p.m. and then 15 minutes later is the Aquaman panel. And again, that's not to say that this is Injustice, but if it was Injustice, it would make sense for it to have a smaller time slot, especially if it's just going to be kind of a smaller reveal, letting everybody know that the game exists, maybe reveal some more information later on in the Inside Injustice panel, talk about that from there, especially because that panel is like 30 minutes long, so they're going to have some extra time to talk about it. Again, just to clarify for the 1 millionth time, none of this is to say that Injustice 3 is happening. It's just to say that it can be Injustice 3. Like I said at the start of this video, I think our speculation should be exactly where it was a couple days ago. Whatever you thought was going to happen at DC FanDome a couple days ago regarding Ed Boon and Injustice, you should still think the exact same thing. And I don't think there's any reason to think otherwise. If you're going into this event expecting Injustice 3, I would certainly maybe pull that back a little bit. Don't expect anything ever. But if you were hopeful for Injustice 3, I would still remain hopeful. There's still that reveal slot. Ed Boon is still at the event, and the social media accounts for DC have been talking about Injustice far more than normal, which is really weird in the month of August. However, I will say, if you were one of those people really expecting Mortal Kombat stuff from this event, I would rein that back. They specifically notated that on their website, that there will not be other Warner Brothers related properties. This is an event specifically about DC. That's not to say that they wouldn't incorporate Mortal Kombat if there was like a DC character coming to the game again, or like some DC skins. But if you were expecting stuff like the Mortal Kombat movie, definitely rein that back. James Wan, who's the Mortal Kombat director, a lot of people thought that he would be involved in the event specifically to reveal the Mortal Kombat movie. I never really understood that, but that's what people thought. But we can see that James Wan is actually specifically listed in the Aquaman panel, so we know that he'll be a part of that. So unless the to be announced thing is the Mortal Kombat movie, which I highly doubt it is, because again, they specifically noted that this event is about DC, I definitely wouldn't hold my breath for Mortal Kombat. Again, unless it's like a DC character in Mortal Kombat. Regardless of whatever happens at this event, I am looking forward to it. Again, obviously, I'm hopeful for Injustice 3, but regardless, I'm excited about WB Montreal's game, and of course, I'm incredibly excited about the Suicide Squad game as well. I'm going to keep my eye firmly locked on those two companies as they announced information for those two games. I'll be covering everything that happens at DC FanDome, video game related, and I'll be watching the whole thing, so I'll probably be tweeting about it and stuff. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, do so. I'll leave a link to it in the description as always. I want to thank you so much again for watching this video. My name has been Bilbzy, and I'll be sure to catch you in the next one.